Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 118, Choosing a Supervisor. Ooh. This vlog comes via request from Daniel. Daniel was very naughty. He said to me he wanted a vlog on bad supervisors. Bad supervisors. Like bad Santa, but bad supervisors. So I'm a much more buoyant, optimistic person than that. And so we won't do bad supervisors, we'll do choosing a supervisor. So this is quite significant, this vlog, because it's helping people, because so many of our vlogs I think focus on how we get you through and the examination at the end. So it is quite important. I think every now and again we do one at the start, so how you choose a supervisor. But there's also something else important here too, because 40% of PhD students change one or more of their supervisors on the way through. So this information might be useful to just park in your locker for a time if you ever actually need it. And of course 40% of you will. Ooh. So how do you choose a supervisor? What are you actually looking for? And I'll repeat a phrase that I used last week for the vlog that we conducted for the wonderful Dylan. We were investigating at that point how to make a selection of a good graduate program. And I quoted that piece of journalism I wrote from the Times Higher Education. Quote, "As a prospective PhD student, you are precious. Institutions want you. Do not let them treat you like a fool." End of quote. So you are really precious. You are incredibly valuable to an institution. So always come to any questioning of a possible supervisor with that information. You are valuable. You are precious. Supervision these days is a buyer beware situation. You have to have the information you require to make those decisions, and you will be held accountable for those decisions. And if you make a mistake, my goodness me, it is an enormous mistake, an enormous error. So the key is, before you make that error, let's try and transform this situation for you so you have the information you need to create and summon a brilliant supervisory relationship. I'm going to be really honest in this vlog. I have a bit of form before I returned to Australia that I was a bit stroppy and a bit naughty. So I'm going to summon a little bit of that stroppy, naughty Tara rather than scholar and gentleman. Oh, I get confused. Scholar and gentlewoman that I am currently in my presentations to you guys. But look, I'm a researcher, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, I'm a dean. And this information I would give anybody who came into my office and said, how would I pick a supervisor? I would give you this information as the dean. But also as a mate, I would give you this information. If we were sharing a lovely Australian Chardonnay in a pub and you asked me this question, I'd give some very similar answers. So I'm going to be really honest today. And can I say, whenever I do work on this topic, whether it's in journalism or refereed articles, or whether it's a presentation such as this or a podcast, I invariably get inflamed emails from academics from around the world. So hashtag stroppy from Toronto, hashtag cross from Bristol. So all these academics get really agitated when I do presentations like this, because how dare I give students information that may question the expertise of academics. And particularly I think for a lot of my colleagues in North America, I really get some aggressive stuff, because they sort of say to me, how dare you make students ask questions of me about whether or not I should be their supervisor? I need students so I can get tenure. So don't you tell students about how to question me. I need those students to get on with my career. I'm not joking. That was an amazing email I received about 18 months ago from a guy from Toronto. Went on for about 5 pages. It was absolutely fantastic. So I simply replied, dear Paul, noted. Right, so sorry about that if academics get offended by what I'm about to say, but you know what? Deal with it. Bring it. If you're good enough, the wonderful students from around the world will come to you. And if you're not good enough, this is a competitive system. This is an international system. And the best supervisors should get the best students. Full stop. In a globalised educational environment, students can now select who their supervisor will be from a huge selection. And always remember, supervising PhD students is a privilege. It's not a right. So for our students out there, be cautious. Due diligence here. Ask the questions, particularly ask the right questions. Remember, you deserve the best. But you know what? You're going to have to search for it. But you're a really, really bright person. Use that expertise and find the right match for you. No good supervisor, no bad supervisor, just the right supervisor for you. Hindsight is 20/20, but let's try and help you mitigate the risk as you're moving into the selection of a supervisor. So here's five quick and dirty tips to get you through this. So let's do this properly. It's going to be a bit stroppy, but let's be honest, as we always are. Okay, 1, ask questions. Lots of them. Ask questions, lots of them. Do not be grateful that an institution accepts you. Students too often are so grateful and thankful and appreciative that a university has deemed to let them into their program. You know what? You're precious, and a lot of universities want you. So a little less of the appreciation, a little bit more of the ask the questions. So you need a quality doctoral experience through your candidature. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to find out that information? Eyes open. Ask questions. So firstly, look at how you're treated by the professional staff, by the administrators when you offer those queries. Really, really important. So are they decent to you? Are you dealing with an actual person? So have you got a name of an administrator that you're dealing with? Is it a professional relationship? How's that looking? Deal with the dean. Send me an email. Send people in my sort of position an email and see the response that you get. Very important. And yes, spend a lot of time asking questions of your supervisor. What do you need to know? What is important to you? So particular things you need to find out, frequency of meetings, what they think about feedback. Get as much of that information as you can so you have a strong sense about what your candidature is going to look like and what it's going to feel like. So write a list of those questions that are important to you and then engage. Quick and dirty tip 2, interview your supervisor. This may involve sitting in his or her office. It may involve a Skype conversation or Zoom or Adobe Connect. But you make sure you have the questions that are important to you and you receive answers to those questions. So do find out about how often you will meet. What are the expectations for feedback? And ask the really tough, interesting questions that supervisors should have no problems telling you. How many PhD students have they supervised? And what's the average length of the candidature that got those students to completion? Ask the questions. Can I get the students through? Can I get the students through quickly? So get a feel of what it would be like to be supervised by this person. I love it when students interview me. In fact, I almost have to sort of say to them, look, you sit there and interview me. Sort of they're having a chat, and, oh, look, I'm really grateful you're meeting me. Don't be grateful. Don't be grateful. Don't want gratitude. You need to get the information from me to see if we're going to get on, if this is going to work. So ask the questions. 3, oh yeah, I'm going there. Ask the questions about authorship. Oh, I get into trouble when I raise this question, authorship. Oh my goodness me. But we do need to make sure that we all agree with what's going on with authorship with PhD students, because the 3 areas where students complain about their candidature: 1, frequency of meetings; 2, capacity to receive timely feedback; and 3, arguments over authorship. Who wrote the piece? So interviewing your supervisor will handle the first two, but you're going to have to overtly ask questions about authorship. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody's ripping anybody off here. That's not my business. Yes, disciplinary specificity, knock yourself out. Not going to go into that area. But let's be clear here. The number of complaints I receive from students around the world about this suggests it is an enormous issue. And we as academics, we can pretend it's not an enormous issue, but it really is. And I'm sure every single one of us who have been around a fair amount of time have seen students' careers destroyed by these authorship discussions, debates, challenges, rows. So in Australia, it's relatively straightforward. We use the Australian Code of Research Conduct. Section 5 is the area that's particularly appropriate for authorship and very important for our PhD students. So in Australia, pretty clear. There it is. Bring that forward, sit that down with a supervisor and go through the Australian Code of Research Conduct. Boom. Always be wary of supervisors or prospective supervisors that randomly summon the phrase Vancouver Protocol. That's become a bit of a proxy for me for someone who is creating a little bit of mischief, I think. So the Vancouver Protocol, very specific protocol for a very specific discipline, for a very specific moment in history, and it's had multiple revisions. Okay, so I once had someone who was working for me, I was head of school, summon the Vancouver Protocol. And I said, you're working in early childhood education. What has that remotely got to do with the Vancouver Protocol? So just be aware of that. The Vancouver Protocol is interesting, I've written about it, but don't assume it's generalisable in any way, shape or form. So authorship is determined by having a role in 3 variables: research design, data collection, writing and editing. They're the 3 components of authorship. So what I discuss in my first meetings, I could discuss the Vancouver Protocol, I could go the Australian Code of Research Conduct, and look, we do all of that, but I never have a row with authorship because, you know, I'm pretty clear on it. If I write it, it's mine. If you write it, it's yours. And if we write it together, it's ours. Not hard. 4, big one, and I've only really realised the importance of this in the last 10 years, but 4, talk with the students of that supervisor. I force my prospective students to actually sit and talk with my former students. They go, oh look, I'd really love you to be my supervisor. You need to talk with the students that I'm supervising now and supervise to completion to see from their perspective what sort of supervision you're going to get. This is the most important tip, I think. Talk to the former students. We so often hear about peer learning and student-centered learning. Well, here this is. So if you want to know what it's going to be like to be supervised by that staff member, talk to their former students. And use email, use LinkedIn, use Skype. You know, except for choosing a partner, choosing a PhD supervisor is the most important selection of a person that you are going to make. Get as much data as you can on this. Talk to the people who have already been supervised. It's like a cooking program. Here's one I prepared earlier. Talk to the people they prepared earlier. 5, download and read the supervisor's CV. Boom. This is an important bit. You are a bright person. You're a really bright person. So therefore get the evidence to make the decision that you need to make. Again, not a good supervisor, not a bad supervisor, a supervisor that suits you. And the CV will give you that information. Can they write? Do they support their students' career and work? Remember, it should be, the bulk of their work should be open access, so you should be able to just click to a link and read their research. And the scale and scope of the research does matter. It differs per disciplines, but the scale and scope of the research does matter. I once had a former head of school, and we're in a research meeting. I was a very junior academic, a B-level lecturer at the time, and we're having a research meeting, and people were talking about it and offering ideas and vibes about research, and all of a sudden the head of school, a Northern Englishman, banged his fist on the table and said, from this point on, the only people that can speak on research in this meeting are the people that abide by the 10, 20, 100 protocol. So we all looked at him like, and then he had to explain, of course, 10, 20, 100 is you don't speak on research unless you've published 10 scholarly monographs, that's 10 books, you've moved 20 PhD students through to completion, and you've produced 100 refereed articles. You don't speak on research until you had the 10, 20, 100. Pretty staunch northern guy he was. Now, I have double that now. You know, I've doubled that, but it's not a matter of numbers. So I'm not actually making a point about numbers, that former head of school did. But it is about scope and scale. And why this matters is see the scale of the research that your supervisor has produced. Now, why this matters is if they've got a lot of books, then they know a lot of publishers, and they can help you get published. If they've got a lot of refereed articles in some of the best journals on this earth, then they probably know the editors and know how refereeing works, so they can help you. So you have to think about if this person can open up opportunities and pathways to your future career. If they haven't got that scope and scale in their CV, then they can't help you. Now, other things to look on the CV, can they speak? Are they keynoting around the world? Have they got a profile whereby they are brought in to keynote? That's important because their name is known when they come to write you references. So their communication and capacity to disseminate their research, analog and digital, will also enable your career. Also, are they good teachers? Have they got teaching qualifications? Or are they simply reliant on experience rather than expertise? And why this matters is we live in really complicated intellectual times in higher education, and andragogy is radically changing. The widening participation agenda has been bedded in. So therefore, you know, we are teaching students. In the old days, 20, 30 years ago, students could be taught by an open refrigerator door, because we literally were teaching affluent young men and young women who their entire career was based on coming to university. We now have a much more diverse group now, and so that's fantastic, that's brilliant, but we have to have theories for teaching and learning to make sure we're looking after these diverse groups. So why teaching matters is that, as we've talked about a lot, teaching pays the bills for a university. So if you're going to get a job in a university, you're going to get it, yes, for your research, that's great, but teaching pays the bills. So you need to gain from this supervisor the value add of how to teach and how to teach well. So ask yourself, what can this supervisor give you beyond the thesis? This value add will get you work, will get you connections, will get you publishing. And yes, future employers, you need someone that is of a stature that when they write you a reference, you get that job. So thank you, Daniel. I told you I'd be a little bit stroppy in this one, and look, I am, but this matters so much to me because I want the best for you. PhD students are often so disempowered. I know it feels like you're basically in the corner of a room cowering a lot of the time. You don't have a lot of choices. And during a candidature and through examination, that's probably true. But where you have all the choices in the world is at the start. So I want you to use those choices. Thank you, Daniel. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.